Welcome back to Dark Night Scare. In today's video, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about Lake House and Scary Cabin in Appalachian Mountain. So, grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and get ready. And please subscribe this channel and like this video. Thank you all. Now let's start. My sister and I had managed to rent a tiny lake house out in the Blue Ridge Hills. At first, it felt like a steal. The rent was low, and it was just close enough to our summer jobs that we wouldn't burn our paychecks on gas. The listing made, it sounded peaceful, using words like rustic charm and lakeside serenity. What we got was more stripped down. 3 narrow bedrooms, 1 cramped bathroom, walls so thin they might as well been cardboard. And for some reason, 0 interior locks. None at all. Not on the bedroom doors, not even on the bathroom. Just open access everywhere. But we were broke, and the place wasn't terrible. Just odd. The owner didn't live on the property, but his brother did. Curtis. He stayed in the first bedroom near the front of the house. He was in his 40s, tall, but somehow forgettable. The kind of person who doesn't seem to take up space, even when they're standing right in front of you. Soft-spoken, always holding a mug of coffee, never said more than a few words. His friend Ron lived in the second room. Ron was older, mid-60s, maybe, and he had the same wallpaper-like presence. Grey hair, blank expression, slow shuffle from room to room. They weren't close friends, more like long-term roommates who tolerated each other's habits. Then there was us, me and my sister Lily. We shared the third bedroom at the back of the house, no complaints. We'd grown up splitting bunk beds and couches, so tight quarters didn't bother us. What mattered was saving money, having a roof. At first things were fine. Work kept us busy, and we barely interacted with the guys, except for passing greetings in the kitchen or hallway. The setup wasn't ideal, but we figured it was temporary. A few months at most, just long enough to get through the season. Still, little details started to nag at us. The kind you brush off until they start adding up, like the bathroom window. It faced the lake, and it was huge for a bathroom. A sliding glass panel almost as wide as the shower. On the inside, someone had rolled thick white paint across it, streaky, uneven, clearly rushed. It made the window look like a solid white wall. I assumed it was for privacy, but it always felt wrong, especially for a shower. One evening, just after 7, I went in to shower. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, and the lake outside was nothing but black water. I noticed the window was cracked open. Not much, maybe an inch, just enough to let in a line of cold air across the tile. I hesitated, then let it be. The paint was opaque, or so I thought. I showered, dressed, and went into the kitchen to heat leftovers. Curtis walked in with his dog, a basset hound named Ranger. He gave me his usual nod, no words, same as always. Nothing in his expression seemed strange, and that was the pattern. Quiet, distant coexistence. We lived around each other, not with each other. Months passed like that. Lily juggled classes and work. I picked up shifts. Most nights we got home late, microwaved something, scrolled our phones, then collapsed into bed. The house wasn't a home. It was just a stop between responsibilities. So when finally did happen, it blindsided us. It was a Thursday. I had an early shift and left around 6:30. Lily stayed behind. She told me later she was cocooned under the blankets, completely hidden. To anyone walking in, it would have looked like a pile of laundry. She was half asleep when she heard it. A noise, soft. A rustle. A rustle. Not loud enough to startle, but just enough that her brain refused to ignore it. She opened her eyes and saw our clothes scattered on the floor. Stuff that should have been in the basket. At first, she thought maybe I had rushed and tossed them around like I sometimes did. But then she saw Ron. He was crouched near the basket, slowly going through our clothes. She froze, silent. He picked up a pair of her underwear and lifted it to his face, held it there, breathed then slowly, deliberately. Her heart pounded, but she stayed still. Eventually, she shifted the blankets just enough to make a rustle, then said as casually as she could, looking for a charger. Ron jumped. His whole body flinched. He stood, muttered, "Yeah," and shuffled out. As he closed the door, he said, "Don't tell anyone." She didn't move for a long time, just stared at the ceiling trying to decide what to do. That night, she texted me while I was at work. By the time I read her messages, my hands had gone cold. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't make it feel real. When I got home, she told me again, this time out loud. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was running on adrenaline. That flat calm people get when they're holding themselves together. She didn't want another night without speaking up. So she told Curtis, blurted out everything. His reaction was strange. No surprise, no disgust, just a nod and a quiet, "Okay." Then he left the house. He came back an hour later with a bag from the hardware store. That night, he installed a lock on our bedroom door. No comments, no questions, just that. After that, we were done. We gave notice the next morning, packed in silence, and avoided everyone. No eye contact, no conversation. The whole house felt tense, like the walls were listening. On our last night, I remembered the laundry we left on the back deck. It was close to midnight. The lake was a black hole. No reflections, no light. I stepped outside to grab the clothes barefoot on the old planks. That's when I turned and saw the bathroom window. I froze. From the outside, the paint looked different, patchy, thin. It caught the porch light in streaks. From a distance, it seemed solid, but up close, you could see right through into the shower. Clearly, every outline, every movement, the paint only worked one way, and it hit me all at once. Curtis, always outside at night with his dog, lingering by the railing, pretending to stare at the lake, but he wasn't watching the water. He was watching the bathroom window, watching us. I dropped the clothes and ran inside, locked the door, sat with my back against it, heart hammering. We didn't sleep much. Morning couldn't come fast enough. By sunrise, our bags were packed. The car was loaded, and we left without a word. No goodbyes. No last glance at the lake, the hills, or the house. We drove until the roads felt unfamiliar again, until we were back in the noise and light of a place filled with other people. The first time I tried to unlock the lake house in southern Appalachia, the key jammed partway into the lock, as if the door had decided it wasn't ready to open. I stood there jiggling it for a solid minute, muttering under my breath. Then I gave, up and shouldered the frame. It gave with a reluctant groan and scraped loudly across the warped floorboards as it opened. Not exactly a warm welcome. Sarah, my cousin, was standing behind me with 2 overstuffed bags. Her grin faded fast once. We stepped inside. You know that feeling when you walk into a place and everything just feels off? Not dirty, not gross, just weirdly empty. That's what hit me the second we crossed the threshold. The air didn't smell like dust or mold or even old wood. It didn't smell like anything. And that was somehow worse. Like the place had been vacuumed, sealed, and forgotten. Every step we took sounded too loud, like the walls were listening, like the house didn't want to be disturbed. The house had been left to us after our great-uncle Elias died. Neither of us had known him well. He was one of those distant relatives you only heard about at family reunions, if that. But for whatever reason, his will named us both. Next thing we knew, we were driving up a winding gravel road to a cabin on Lake Duval. Sarah swore she'd spent part of a summer there when she was 11 or 12. But as we walked through it, I couldn't imagine anyone staying longer than an hour. The kitchen was stripped bare. Not a single cup, spoon, or sticky old condiment bottle in the fridge. Speaking of the fridge, it hummed like it worked, but when I opened it, the inside practically sparkled. No stains, no dust, the kind of clean that felt sterile. I touched the shelf and pulled my hand back, surprised it didn't squeak like glass. The drawer stuck, all of them. I tried the one under the sink and had to tug so hard I thought the handle would snap off. When it finally opened, it was empty, except for a brittle rubber band and a crumpled piece of paper. I couldn't even unfold it. It flaked apart in my hand. Every room was like that. Furniture in place, beds made up like they were expecting guests, but no trace of anyone ever actually living there. No books, no socks under the bed, not even a hair in the bathroom sink. That first night, I went to bed early. Sarah stayed up flipping through the 10 or so DVDs we brought, no Wi-Fi, and barely any cell signal. I must have fallen asleep around midnight. No dreams, just a dead black sleep until, bam, I was awake. No reason, no noise, no nightmare, just wide open eyes and this sense that something had nudged me awake from inside my own head. It was 3:01. I remember the glowing digits. On my cheap little travel alarm clock, the room was still. I listened, breathing shallow, wondering if maybe Sarah had knocked something over. Then I heard water, not rain, not waves. Lake Duval's barely more than a large pond. This was soft, smooth, gentle, but deliberate. A ripple, maybe, but not random. It moved in a perfect circle around the house. I couldn't see it right away from the bedroom window, so I stepped onto the porch in my socks and stood there, arms crossed tight against the cold. I watched the ripple trace its way across the lake surface, slow and steady, like someone dragging a stick just under the water, around the whole shoreline, hugging the edge, looping the property. And then, as soon as it completed the circle, it disappeared, not faded, not blended into the water, just gone. The next morning, Sarah looked half asleep and annoyed, shuffling around for coffee filters. She gave up and dumped ground straight into the pot, filled it with water, turned it on. It hissed and gurgled like normal. She walked off to brush her teeth. When she came back, she froze. Called my name, low and urgent. When I got there, she was holding the coffee pot like it might explode. It was hot. The machine had run, but there was nothing inside, not a drop, not even steam. The warming plate wasn't stained or wet, just dry and clean, like it had never been used. Sarah's eyebrows pulled tight. It was full, she said low and sharp, like I'd somehow dumped it out. I just stared. She set the pot down hard and walked, away without another word. Later that afternoon, she went to shower. I sat on the porch swing with a book. When she came back out, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, she looked unsettled. "Why'd you open the bedroom doors?" she asked. I blinked. I didn't. They were shut when I went in. They were shut when I went out. She didn't answer, just stood there a moment, then turned and walked down the hallway. We didn't bring it up again. On the second day, more things happened. The dock, which had been a decent distance from the house, looked closer when we opened the door. I stepped it off. 5 paces. Yesterday, it had been at least 20. The ground between was soggy, waterlogged, like it had rained hard. But it hadn't. Neither of us had heard a thing all night. Then we saw the footprints scattered in the mud between porch and dock. Small, narrow, close together. Not ours. Sarah crouched, touched one, then pulled back like it stung. "They're fresh," she said. "Too fresh." We tried walking back up to the porch, but the ground felt wrong. Stretchy, like a treadmill, just a little too fast. Every step harder than it should have been. I looked up and the house seemed farther away. We didn't talk, just kept moving. By the time we reached the porch, we were out of breath. Like we'd hiked uphill for miles. We leaned against the rail, catching our breath in silence. That night, the house didn't let me sleep. I woke again. 3:02 this time. Heart already racing. Then I heard it, not outside, inside. The floorboards in the living room groaned, then flexed. I swear they moved, swelled up like a ripple in wood, like someone had dropped a pebble in a pond. The wave rolled under the floor instead of water. It flattened out again like nothing had happened. Sarah screamed. I was through her door in 2 seconds, breath tight in my throat. She was on the far side of the room, pointing at her bed, shaking. The sheets were soaked. The mattress sagged with water dripping onto the floor. She touched it like she needed proof. Her hands came away glistening. She kept whispering, "Water, water," over and over. We didn't talk about what to do. We just started packing. I grabbed both duffels, shoving everything that fit. Sarah moved like a machine, stuffing whatever fit. We dragged the bags through the hallway. The floorboards felt soft under our feet, almost spongy, like they'd soaked through from underneath. When we got outside, the air hit my face, like I'd just come up from underwater. I turned to lock the door, but froze. The lake was still flat, mirror-like, and in the reflection, I saw the house, only not this house. That house had its windows wide open, curtains blowing outward like wind was, blasting through. But up here, the air was perfectly still. And in the second floor window, I saw 2 figures. They leaned out slightly, watching. One looked like me, the other like Sarah. Their faces were pale, distorted by the water's surface. But I knew what I saw. I didn't say a word, just shoved the bags into the trunk and started the car. We didn't stop driving until Route 39. My cousin Marcellus had been talking about that cabin for months, dropping hints about this secret place he knew deep in the Appalachians. He'd say, "You know where we could go?" with this look like it was obvious. This cabin, his secret hideaway, deep in the Appalachians, was buried so far out that even satellite maps couldn't decide if the road was real. He made it sound like a place that had disappeared from the world. No reception, no neighbors, not even the faint hum of a distant highway. Just trees, and quiet. He said he'd stayed there once years ago, and it was the most peaceful place he'd ever been, that he didn't sleep so much as sink into the silence. It sounded nice, honestly, maybe too good to be true. But I was curious. The place wasn't technically his. It belonged to someone he knew through work, though he never really explained the details. He got access whenever he wanted. I asked him, point blank, what the favor was, what kind of work they were doing out there, but he just shrugged it off like it wasn't worth remembering. "Long time ago," he said. "Doesn't matter now." We picked early October for the trip. Right, when the leaves had started changing but hadn't fallen yet. The drive started out easy, then got winding, the landscape closing in until even the houses thinned out. Eventually, the road stopped pretending to be friendly, narrowing to a single-lane dirt track bordered by gullies. No shoulder, no guardrails. It twisted up and down steep grades that made the engine whine. I had to lean forward in my seat like my weight might help the car up the next incline. Rocks kicked up by the tires sounded like they were pinging straight off the gas tank. When we finally reached the clearing, I honestly thought we'd taken a wrong turn. The trees pressed in, so tightly it looked like the forest was holding its breath. The cabin squatted low to the ground, wide and lopsided, with a roof that sagged just enough to catch your eye. The wood was faded and cracked, stained in streaks that looked like they'd been bleeding down from the nails for decades. A chimney leaned slightly away from the structure, almost like it was trying to leave. Inside was heavier. The air was dense. The front door opened into this one big room with a stone fireplace and 2 chairs that gave you splinters just by looking at them. A table was pushed against the wall under a narrow, dirty window. There was a tiny back room with a single cot and a ladder leading to a cramped loft above. No electricity, no outlets, no lights. Just an old oil lamp on the table and whatever light you could squeeze in through the dusty windows. We grilled some trout Marcellus had caught, opened a couple of beers, and sat by the fire until the stars came out. No traffic, no planes, just us and the woods. I'll admit, part of me started to get it. The quiet was unnerving at first, but there's something kind of magnetic about it until you have to sleep in it. I went to bed a little after midnight. Sometime before dawn, I woke up, definitely not from a dream, just suddenly alert. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy ones on the hallway floor. You know how old wood sounds with each step, that distinct weight? Like someone trying not to wake a baby but failing miserably. I figured it was Shane, maybe heading to the bathroom or getting a drink. But then the steps stopped right outside my door. They didn't knock, didn't shift, just stood there. I held my breath, waiting. After maybe a minute, the steps slowly walked, away, same slow rhythm, same heavy pressure, fading down the hall. When I got up, Shane was making coffee. He poured it mid-sentence and said, "Sleeping like a rock." I told him about the footsteps. He just shrugged. Old place, it settles. That phrase. I didn't say it. Second night, we stayed up later. Fire going, bright, and the woods dead silent. You can't see more than a few feet past the tree line out there when the sun's down. I kept glancing over my shoulder like something had just brushed my thoughts the wrong way. At one point, Shane stopped and looked back too, like he was waiting for something to emerge. He muttered mostly to himself, "You could follow someone out here real easy, never be seen." Then he kept walking. I didn't respond. I didn't want to know what made him say that. We got back just before sunset. I checked the marks again. Still there. Still too long. But I told myself I was tired. I'd imagined it must have been. That second night, the sound came back. Same dragging scrape. Only this time it moved along the wall around the side of the cabin. I could hear it pacing, if that's even the right word, slow and steady, like it was circling us. Then it stopped at the front door. The lamp flickered, not like it was running out of oil, more like the air had thickened and smothered the flame, just slightly. It didn't go out, it just hesitated. Shane sat up. "Stay quiet," he whispered. We both held still. The sound stayed right there. No knocking, no rattling of the handle, no movement, just that silence again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. Eventually, it stopped or faded. I'm not even sure, but it didn't leave. When we woke up, the door was cracked open. I know I'd locked it. The latch had clicked, but now it was just hanging there, slightly ajar. And the marks, they stretched nearly from the top of the frame to the bottom. Same 3 lines, just longer, reaching. We packed quickly. No breakfast, no discussion. Shane kept glancing at the woods like he was waiting for something to emerge. I didn't ask what. I didn't want him to say it out loud. As we pulled away, tires spinning a little in the loose dirt, I glanced back one last time. That's when I saw them. 2 deep grooves, perfectly parallel, trailing from the trees right up to the edge of the porch, like something had been dragged there or had dragged itself there. We didn't speak until we were back on pavement. My uncle owned this old cabin way out in the Appalachian Mountains. He hadn't been up there in decades. He always called it a fixer-upper with character, which, if you translate it from Uncle's speak, basically means it's one stiff breeze away from becoming firewood. The offer came out of nowhere. I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes I hadn't unpacked because, well, I'd just quit my job, and my relationship had imploded in spectacular fashion. Life felt too loud, overwhelmingly so. And then he called. "If you want to get away for a while, you can stay up there rent-free. Just don't burn it down." That was all he said. No strings attached, no conditions. Honestly, I think he half hoped the place would burn down so he could stop paying property taxes on it. But for me, that call was like a rope thrown to a drowning person. I needed out. So, a week later, I was driving into the mountains. My belongings crammed into the back seat. The drive was long, 2 hours on the highway, then another hour on these narrow, winding roads that felt like they just coiled tighter and tighter around the hills. I lost cell service about 20 minutes after leaving the interstate. My podcast gave up. Even the radio abandoned me, leaving only static. For the last stretch, it was just me, the empty road, and the hum of my own engine. When I finally pulled into the clearing, I actually laughed. This cabin didn't just look old. It looked like someone had stopped building it halfway through and then simply forgot about it for 50 years. One room, a porch with loose boards that groaned underfoot, and a deck that leaned as if it had surrendered to gravity, but it was quiet. That was the point. The first couple of weeks were honestly amazing. I slept like a rock, chopped wood, cooked on the old gas stove, read books until the oil lamp flickered low. No deadlines, no calls, no people. My nearest neighbor was supposedly 30 minutes away, and that isolation felt like medicine. And for a while, I believed that. The first odd thing wasn't even dramatic. It was just this weird sense that someone was nearby. You know that feeling when you think someone's watching you? It's not anything you see. It's the way the hair on your arm suddenly stands up, like your body knows something before your brain does. I'd be out back splitting logs and then, boom, there it was, like eyes on me. Every time I turned, nothing, just trees. I blamed it on nerves. My city brain wasn't used to the silence. Then one afternoon, I was down at the creek filling a jug. The sun was dropping fast and the air had that heavy late-day stillness to it. I turned around and froze. There was a man across the creek, not moving, just standing there as if he'd been waiting. He was about my age, maybe younger. Jeans so dirty they were practically brown, a torn flannel shirt, and a beard that looked like he'd trimmed it with a rock. "You staying up in the old Carson place?" he called. His voice carried in this flat, matter-of-fact way, like he already knew the answer. I hesitated before I said, "Yeah." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. Then he smiled. "And listen," he said. That wasn't the friendly kind of smile people give when they meet a stranger in the woods. It was the kind that sits in your stomach wrong. "Name's Wade," he said. "I live close by." I didn't ask where. He didn't offer. We exchanged a few more words. Nothing memorable. And then he just slipped back into the trees. No sound, no crunch of leaves, just gone. I told myself it was fine, just a local checking in. People out here probably did that, right? But after that, I saw him everywhere. At first, it was random. A glimpse on the trail while I hiked down by the creek when I went for water. Always in the distance. Always still. Then it changed. I'd step out onto the porch in the morning and there he'd be, leaning against a tree at the edge of the clearing. Not close enough to talk, close enough so I knew he wanted me to see him. He never waved, never called out, just stared. I tried to shrug it off. People live differently out here, I told myself. Maybe he's curious. Then the notes started. The first one was on the porch, weighted down with a rock. "Nice to see you by the creek." No name, no signature, just neat block letters in black ink. I laughed when I read it, but my hands were shaking. 2 days later, "You look tired today. Then you should come visit." That one made my stomach. Visit where? I started locking the door even during the day. The next morning, I noticed something. My axe, the one I kept in the chopping block, was gone. I looked everywhere. It wasn't like I misplaced it. Someone had taken it. That night, I stayed up late reading by lamplight, trying to calm down. That's when I heard it, the porch boards creaking, slow, heavy. I blew out the lamp and froze. Another creak, closer to the door. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I grabbed the rifle from the corner and sat in the dark, listening. One more creak and then silence. When I finally pulled back the curtain, the porch was empty, but muddy footprints led straight to the door and back into the trees. I barely slept. The next day, I drove into town for supplies and asked the guy at the general store if he knew Wade. He gave me a blank look. I described him. The man frowned and said, "Only other cabin up that way burned down 20 years ago. Ain't been nobody living there since. I laughed like it was a joke, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I barricaded the door with a chair and kept the rifle across my lap. Around 3 a.m., a dog started barking outside. Except I didn't have a dog. The barking was furious, right outside the window. Then it cut off mid-snarl. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Then the doorknob turned slowly, like someone testing it. I yelled that I had a gun and would shoot. The knob froze for a second, then turned the other way. When the door didn't open, I heard him move around back. The boards there creaked once, twice, then nothing. I sat frozen, gripping the rifle so tight my hands ached. 10 minutes passed, maybe 20. Then something slammed against the wall hard. Once, twice, a third time like he was trying to break through. That was it. I wasn't dying in that cabin. I climbed out the bedroom window barefoot, keys clutched in one hand, rifle in the other. I ran to the truck without looking back. When the engine roared, I floored it down the mountain road, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. When I finally glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the clearing right in the glow of my tail lights, holding my missing axe in one hand, just watching me go. I didn't stop until I hit the sheriff's office. They sent deputies up the mountain. They didn't find anyone. But when we went back the next morning so I could grab my stuff, the cabin wasn't empty. On the table, perfectly centered, was a single sheet of notebook paper. In those same block letters, it said, "You should have stayed longer." The first time I saw the cabin, I nearly overlooked it. Honestly, it looked more like a part of the woods that had simply slumped down and given up. It blended so well into the slope, it might as well have been a dead tree or a rotting stump. Leaning slightly, its boards turned grey by rain and sun, the roof patched haphazardly with mismatched shingles. There was no smoke from the chimney, no smell of wood burning, nothing to indicate it was lived in. It just sat there, an empty shape, as if holding its breath and waiting for something. I wouldn't have even noticed it if the window near the peak hadn't caught the sunlight at just the right angle. Just this quick flash of glare, like an eye opening for a second before closing again. And the thing is, I wasn't even looking for a cabin. That wasn't part of the plan. My uncle owns a vast tract of land out here in the Appalachian Mountains. Miles of steep woods, valleys that feel untouched by human feet, old logging roads that start promisingly and then vanish into nothing. When I told him I needed a break, some time away from everything, he said, "Use the hunting place. It's quiet." So that's what I thought. I was getting a proper hunting cabin, maybe rustic, sure, but something with actual walls and maybe even a porch. It wasn't that, not even close. What I found was one small room, plank floors you could probably see daylight through if you dropped a coin, a cot with a mattress so stained it looked like it held secrets, and a propane stove that honestly scared me more than the idea of running into a bear. The thing looked old enough for a museum of things that explode, but I wasn't there for luxury. I wasn't there for comfort. I came out for quiet, for no signal, no neighbors, no traffic noise, no screens glowing at me, just trees, just stillness. After the months I'd had, the idea of silence sounded like a gift. The hike in wasn't bad. The trail was soft in places, and there were spots where the markers were so faded I had to squint. But I made it. When I finally reached the shack, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell, a musty, dusty kind of scent like wet wood and old rodent nests. I dropped my pack, unrolled my sleeping bag, and went straight for the broom in the corner. The floor was scattered with mouse droppings. I started sweeping, the bristles scratching against the boards and kicking up enough dust to choke on. My eyes watered and my throat burned, but when I was done, the place almost looked decent. Not nice, just acceptable. That first night was easy. I sat at the little table with a lantern, the notebook I'd brought open in front of me. I told myself I'd write something every night, even if it was just a sentence. No distractions out here, just me, my thoughts, and the occasional groan of wood outside when the wind shifted. It was almost good, peaceful in a way I'd forgotten how to feel. When I finally crawled into my bag, I felt calm, like brain had finally turned down a notch for the first time in months. The second night was the same. The third night, the silence was so thick it started to feel like it had weight, like I was breathing it in. And then I woke up to find the broom lying across the doorway. I froze, just staring at it. I'd left it propped in the corner, no question about that. Now it was on the floor, laid at an angle as if someone had put it there to block the door. The thing is, the floor tilted away from the entrance, so it shouldn't have rolled like that. Not like that. I picked it up, put it back, and laughed under my breath as if it were a joke that barely landed. Told myself I must have bumped it, which didn't even make sense because I was in my sleeping bag. But I didn't feel like arguing with myself about it at 3 in the morning. That evening, I tried to write again, but I couldn't get into it. The page just stared back while the windows turned black. No curtains, just glass, and outside was nothing but darkness pressing in. The lantern felt small, ridiculous. I ended up leaving it on when I lay down. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. A tap, just one, on the wall, sharp and hollow. I sat up so fast my ribs hurt, ears straining so hard they felt like they'd pop. I waited. Nothing. Not another sound. No footsteps. No second tap. Just my pulse, and maybe wind. If it was wind. Morning made it easy to shrug off. It always does. I stepped outside, half expecting to find a branch leaning against the wall. Nothing. No branch, no tracks, just a carpet of wet leaves, and the narrow deer path curling deeper into the hills. By day 5, I needed a bigger distraction. So, I hiked over the ridge. The trail narrowed until I wasn't even sure it was a trail anymore, just a crease in the earth. The air was damp, heavy, like it was clinging to me. And then I saw it. Another cabin. It was sitting low in a hollow about 2 miles in, sagging as if it had given up years ago. Roof half caved, door shut tight, windows like empty eye sockets. I didn't need a reason to stay away. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go, closer. And then I saw the footprints, bare feet in the mud by the steps. I froze, trying to figure out how old they were. It had rained 2 nights ago, so they should have washed out, but they were perfect, crisp, every toe showing as if whoever left them had just walked off into the trees. My skin prickled like I'd walked through a web. I backed up slowly, step by step, until the trees swallowed the hollow. Then I turned and walked fast, too fast. When I got back to my cabin, the broom was across the door again. That night, I didn't undress, didn't even unlace my boots. I sat on the cot with the lantern burning and my pack half zipped, telling myself over and over that it was nothing, just a broom, just some old footprints, nothing. I lay down sometime, after 2, but I don't think I slept. The sound woke me anyway. A scrape, then a slow dragging slide, like something brushing across the boards outside, circling, then tapping. Tiny knocks uneven, as if whoever or whatever was out there couldn't decide on a pattern. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. My pulse was so loud I almost didn't hear when it stopped. And then 2 hard taps on the wall, right by my head. I sat up so fast the lantern swung wild, throwing shadows across the floor. The broom's shadow jumped like it was moving. I grabbed the broom without even thinking like that would help and whispered, "Who's out there?" Nothing. No voice, no footsteps, just the creak of trees and my voice sounding small. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor until dawn, waiting for something else that didn't come. By morning, I was done. My week wasn't over, but I didn't care. I packed in 10 minutes flat. I should have left the night before, but the trail was wrong. What had been a straight shot to the ridge now curled into thicket I didn't recognize. Landmarks were gone. I walked half a mile before I hit a wall of deadfall I'd never seen before. Branches piled like a barricade. I backtracked, tried another direction, another wall of brush. None of it looked natural. By sunset, I was back at the cabin, legs shaking, water almost gone. I told myself I'd try again tomorrow. That night, the knocks didn't come. The dragging did. Long, soft strokes across the boards, circling the walls, sometimes pausing, sometimes doubling back like fingers tracing seams. When the first knock hit the door, my throat closed. And then came the voice, not outside, inside, low, almost gentle. From the corner near the stove, don't go back. I spun with the lantern. Nothing, just my gear, the cot, and a stain on the floor that hadn't been there yesterday, spreading like a shadow. I stood slow, every nerve screaming. And that's when I saw the broom, not by the door. In the center of the room, standing upright, balanced like a trick, something shifted behind me, air or breath. I couldn't tell, and I ran. Didn't grab my pack, didn't grab the lantern. I just ripped the door open and sprinted into the dark. Branches tore at my arms, roots clawed my boots. I ran until the ground tilted and the sound of water roared up out of the black stream. Then gravel. I stumbled onto a logging road and followed it by moonlight until a truck came. The driver didn't ask why I was bleeding or coatless. He just drove. I never went back. My uncle Darren asked me to check on his lake house near Lark's Ridge while he was working out in Oregon for a couple months. He's a field engineer, bouncing around from project to project, and the house had been sitting empty for nearly a year. By then, he mostly kept it as a getaway spot, but I don't think he'd spent more than a weekend there in the past 3 years. It was one of those cabins people love to brag about, but rarely use. Quiet, remote, tucked away off a gravel road, with no name. If you missed the turn, you'd never know anything was down there. There was no cell reception past a certain bend, and GPS gave up entirely about 10 minutes before you arrived. That kind of place. He needed someone to make sure the pipes hadn't frozen, no wild animals had moved in, and the roof hadn't caved under a heavy branch. Mostly just a walk through, maybe stay a night or two. It sounded like a mini vacation to me. No traffic, no neighbors, no emails. Just a few days off the grid with a stocked fridge, some downloaded movies, and an entire lake to myself. The drive out there took longer than expected. After I passed a diner called Elmer's, one I vaguely remembered from a family road trip when I was 10. The world sort of fell away. Just trees, old mailboxes, and the occasional rusted-out truck peeking through weeds. I filled up at the last gas station I saw. One of those places with a flickering open sign and a snack shelf that hadn't been restocked since 1999. And then I kept driving. No music, just the crunch of gravel under my tires and the occasional squirrel darting across the road like it had, a death wish. When I pulled into the driveway, it all looked like I remembered. The cabin had this postcard kind of charm to it. Nothing fancy, just weathered cedar siding, 2 bedrooms, a wraparound deck, and a dock that stretched into the still black water like a finger pointing nowhere. Inside was simple but functional. A fireplace, sagging armchairs, an old TV that only played DVDs, and a kitchen with the bare essentials. I dropped my bags, aired the place out, and did a quick walkthrough to make sure everything was still standing. No burst pipes, no raccoons in the pantry. Everything looked fine. I stocked the fridge with frozen meals and cold brew, set my laptop on the kitchen table, and started to settle in. That first night was exactly what I'd hoped for. Peaceful. I made pasta, had a beer out on the deck, and just listened to the night. The lake was completely still. Not even a breeze. Just frogs, and the occasional splash of a fish surfacing. I slept like a rock. The second night, though, something felt different. I was half asleep, drifting in and out, when I noticed this soft, repetitive tapping sound. Nothing loud, just enough to pull me back the full awareness. At first, I figured it was the rowboat bumping against the dock. My uncle had kept that old wooden boat tied there for as long as I could remember. It wasn't exactly seaworthy, but it floated. Still, The tapping was weirdly rhythmic. Tap, pause, tap. It went on long enough that I got up and slid open the deck door to take a look. The boat wasn't where it should have been. It had drifted out maybe 6 or 7 feet, bobbing gently. The rope stretched taut across the surface. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way down the deck stairs. The dock creaked under my feet. I hauled the boat back in, tied the rope again, tight this time, 3 solid knots, and stood there for a minute, just staring out across the lake. It was quiet, not peaceful quiet, just nothing like the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I told myself the rope must have loosened. Water, weather, gravity, whatever. Things shift, not slip. I went back inside, had another drink, and eventually managed to fall asleep. But the next morning, that explanation didn't hold up so well. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee, still rubbing sleep for my eyes, and froze mid-sip. The boat was drifting out again. Only this time, the rope hadn't come loose. It had been cut cleanly through, not frayed, not worn, just a smooth, straight cut, like someone had taken a knife to it. I stood there for a long time, turning that rope over in my hand. My first thought was prank. Maybe some local kids knew. The place was usually empty and decided to mess around, but I hadn't seen a single soul since I got there. No vehicles, no bike tracks, nothing. The cabin was too far out for someone to just wander by. Still, I didn't panic. Not really. I brought the boat back in, tied it with a new length of rope from the shed, and told myself someone probably came by during the day while I was napping or wearing headphones. From then on, I kept the doors locked. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every little sound had me wide-eyed under the covers. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. On the deck. Slow, steady. One step, then another. Creaking. Wood, deliberate pacing right outside the bedroom window. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The footsteps went from one end of the deck to the other. Then they stopped. I waited for a knock, a shadow, anything. Nothing. After what felt like forever, I finally got up. I opened the door and stepped outside. The deck was empty, but the air felt heavier somehow, like something had just been there. Then I noticed the dock stairs, wet and leading down away from the deck, were footprints, bare human. They ended at the lake, just disappeared into the water. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I stayed inside. Didn't open the curtains. Didn't go out on the deck. I just sat on the couch drinking cold coffee and staring at the door. Every creak in the wood had me gripping the arms of the chair like a cartoon character. Around 11:30 that night, I heard the gate rattle. Not loud, just a subtle repeated jiggle. The gate that led from the side of the house down to the dock. I stood frozen in the hallway for a minute, before inching toward the kitchen window. I angled. The blinds just enough to peek through, and there it was, the boat. Back at the dock, tied perfectly. Same rope, same knot. Like nothing had ever happened. Except I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even gone near the water since the footprints. That's when I tried calling Darren. My phone blinked. No service, like it was mocking me. I walked around, the cabin, arm in the air, searching for a signal. Nothing. When I turned back to the window, there was someone on the dock just standing there, still as stone, shoulders hunched, head slightly tilted, like they were trying to see into the house. I couldn't make out their face, just the outline, moonlight behind them. They didn't move, didn't call out, just stood there. And that was it for me. I grabbed my keys, slipped out the front door, and didn't even look back. I ran to the car, fired up the engine, and drove like hell down that gravel road, skidding on the turns, not stopping until the signal bars came back. I called the sheriff's office the second I had a connection, explained what I could, probably sounded insane. They sent someone out. By the time the deputy got there, everything looked normal. No footprints, no cut rope, no figure on the dock. They suggested maybe I'd seen a hiker or a local fisherman. told me it wasn't unheard of for people to get curious about empty properties. I nodded along, thanked them, and packed my stuff. Left, the key under the mat, just like Darren had asked, and I drove. Didn't stop until I reached a highway hotel about 3 hours south. Checked in with shaking hands and slept with every light on. I never asked Darren if he went back, never brought it up. My Aunt Jess had just inherited a lake house from some distant cousin none of us had ever met near Carver Ridge, West Virginia. She took one look at the photos the lawyer sent and said, "Absolutely not." Then she tossed me the keys and told me to use it if I wanted a break from the city. No rent, no strings, just don't die of boredom. At the time, that sounded perfect. I had just finished my second year of college, and everything in my brain felt like it had been run through a blender. Classes, relationships, the city noise constantly pressing in from all sides. I needed out. I thought a week by a quiet lake might clear my head, reset the static or whatever. So I packed a duffel with clothes, a few paperbacks, my journal, and a week's worth of groceries. Then I made the 6-hour drive, blasting some overly dramatic playlist just to stay awake. I arrived in the late afternoon, and the place looked exactly like the pictures. Small, sunken, almost shy, the kind of house that looks like it's been holding its breath for years. Brown paneling, uneven porch steps, a screen door that hung just slightly off-center, trees crowded thick on all sides, like they've been growing toward the house, not away from it. The back porch faced the lake, and the first thing I did, walked straight out to the dock. No unpacking, no food, no checking the plumbing, just straight out to the water. And man, that lake was silent, completely still, like one big sheet of smoked glass. Across from me, the opposite shore looked deceptively close, maybe a short swim if I really pushed myself. But the longer I stared at it, the farther away it seemed. The trees over there started to look thinner, fuzzier like someone slowly zooming out. I blinked and shook my head, chalking it up to the way water messes with distance. Weird, but I was tired, probably hungry. I told myself not to overthink it. That night, I made a quick dinner, just pasta with jarred sauce, and sat at the little kitchen table near the window. Everything in the house had that sun-bleached second-hand feel. The chair creaked under me. The light above the sink flickered once when I turned it on, but didn't go out. After I ate, I carried my plate to the sink. That's when I noticed the chair I'd been sitting in wasn't pushed in anymore. It was pulled back slightly, turned just a little, facing the hallway. I froze, just stared at it, and I had this tiny, ridiculous thought. Maybe someone had been sitting there after me. Then I laughed at myself, figured I must have bumped it with my leg when I got up. The house was old. Stuff moved weird. Nothing to get weird about on day one. The second day, I decided to get my bearings. No Wi-Fi out there, obviously. Barely any cell service either. I took a slow hike around the property, trying to map the boundaries in my head. It was more isolated than I'd realized. No other cabins, no driveways, no distant lawnmowers or dogs barking, just thick trees pressing in from every angle. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. As I looped back toward the clearing, I paused. The front of the house looked off, like one side had sunk slightly lower into the ground. One of the windows was clearly higher than the others. The door frame looked like it had been reattached by someone eyeballing it. The whole thing leaned just a little, but when I stepped inside, everything felt normal again. No tilted floors, no crooked lines, just dusty furniture and uneven floorboards. I told myself it was probably the angle of the sun or something dumb, like that. Brushed it off. By the third day, I started losing track of things. I plugged in my phone before bed, same spot on the kitchen counter, using the only outlet that didn't spark. But in the morning, it wasn't there. I tore the place apart, assuming I'd moved it in my sleep or knocked it to the floor. Eventually, I found it inside my suitcase wrapped in a t-shirt I hadn't even worn yet. folded like someone had tucked it there. Another time, my keys disappeared. I always left them on the hook by the front door, same spot every time. But that afternoon, I found them sitting on the porch railing, balanced perfectly, not tossed, not dropped, balanced like someone had set them there carefully. I started questioning myself constantly. Did I move them? Did I really plug in the phone? Was I just scatterbrained? That's the thing. When nothing is obviously wrong, you blame yourself. You doubt your memory, not the room. And the lake kept shifting. Not in any dramatic way. It was subtle, slow. In the mornings, it felt cozy, almost small. But every afternoon it stretched. The opposite shore got hazier. The line where the water met the trees looked less like a border, more like a vanishing point. I stood on the dock more than once, just staring, trying to tell if the world was stretching out or if I was shrinking in. That night, I was curled up on the couch with a book when I heard this low rhythmic thumping. Not a knock, more like something being dropped again and again, heavy, steady. I paused, listened. It wasn't upstairs, wasn't at the door. It was under me, under the floor. I got down on my knees and pressed my ear to the wood. The vibration went through my jaw. That's how deep it was, like the floor was trying to hum something to me. And my bones were picking it up. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, thinking maybe something a gun trapped under the deck, an animal maybe, or some loose equipment. But the second my feet hit the ground, the sound stopped. Dead silence. No wind, no insects. The lake was so still it looked fake. Then I saw it. In the reflection on the water, clear as a mirror, I saw the house behind me. But in the reflection, someone was standing on the dock. A shape, human. Still, I turned around. The dock was empty. I stood there for a long time, gripping the flashlight so hard my fingers went numb. I didn't go back in that night. On the afternoon, I was finishing up, packing clothes into the bag without folding. Sarah moved like a machine, stuffing whatever fit. I grabbed my keys, double-checked my phone. I planned to leave before dawn, just as soon as there was enough light to make it down those narrow roads. Around 9, while I was finishing up, this smell hit me. Rotten, thick, like spoiled meat left baked in the sun. It hit the back of my throat like acid. My eyes watered instantly. I gagged, stumbled out of the bedroom into the living room, and it was gone. Just like that, the air was clean again. I paced the room, sniffing like an idiot, trying to figure out if something had died in the walls. Nothing. I sat on the couch, with my bag at my feet, and told myself I'd wait a few hours, then drive, keep the lights on, keep the exit close. At some point, my eyes got heavy. I don't know if I fully fell asleep or just drifted in that floaty, half-dream state. But when I came to, the air felt wrong. Too thick, like something was pressing against my skin, not touching, just pushing. I turned my head toward the corner of the room. There was something there. It wasn't a person, not really. It was this murky brown shape, squat and dense, like a knot of dirty smoke. Its edges shimmered, not like light, but like heat. Wavy, slippery. It didn't move, didn't sway, didn't twitch, but I could feel it heavy and aware. My mouth was dry. I could hear my pulse behind my eyes, but I forced out a whisper. "What do you want?" My voice didn't sound right. It sounded like someone else trying to copy me. Too soft, wrong shape. The thing didn't answer, didn't move, just existed, solid, waiting. I reached for my bag without looking away, fumbled until I felt the strap. I didn't blink, didn't breathe deep. I stood up one motion, slow and careful, walked to the door. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely turn the knob. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, didn't look back. I drove through the night, headlights cutting the curves of the mountain road, not stopping, Not checking mirrors, just driving until the sun came up and I saw signs for real towns again. Caleb was the one who talked me into it. We hadn't hung out in a while, and he pitched the trip like it was going to fix everything. Stress, burnout, all of it. Just two old friends, a couple days at his family's cabin. Honestly, it sounded amazing at the time. He said it was deep in the Appalachian foothills on land his grandparents had owned for decades. And of course, in my head, I pictured this perfect postcard. A cozy little log cabin with a stone fireplace. Maybe a deer wandering by in the morning. That crisp, clean mountain air everyone raves about. I figured I'd come back feeling like a new person. The drive was brutal, nearly 5 hours. The first half was fine. Highway, gas stations, the usual. But after that, it felt like we just drove straight out of the world. The road started twisting like someone had dropped a piece of spaghetti on a map and said, "Yep, that's the route." Each turn was sharper than the last, and the further we went, the fewer signs we saw. Then, one by one, the houses disappeared. No gas stations, no barns, not even mailboxes, just trees. Thick walls of trees closing in on both sides. By the last hour, we had no service. Not even one sad little bar clinging to life on the screen. I kept checking out of habit, but it was dead. No signal, no GPS, nothing. It was just us, the car, and those endless curves. And those mountains, they didn't feel friendly. They weren't like the mountains you see on postcards with cheerful little cabins and ski lodges. These were massive, dark, like something ancient that didn't care if you got lost in them forever. By the time we finally reached the cabin, the sun had dipped behind the peaks. That last bit of light was hanging on like it didn't want to be there. And the cabin, it was nothing like what I pictured. The porch leaned to one side as if the whole structure was tired of standing. The steps sagged in the middle. Moss had climbed halfway up the logs, and the windows were so clouded they didn't reflect anything, just dull grey glass staring back. It didn't look dangerous or haunted or anything like that. It just looked forgotten. Inside, it smelled old, not like mold or anything rotten, just like it had been sealed for years. The air was heavy. The walls were dark timber, the kind that drinks up light instead of bouncing it back. The furniture looked like it had been bought during a different century. Big clunky chairs, a couch with flattened cushions, shelves full of glass jars, containing stuff I couldn't even identify. The fireplace was blackened from years of use, like it had consumed more wood than the trees outside could count. There was no television, no clock ticking in the background, no noise except for us moving around. The hallway was narrow with 2 small bedrooms and a bathroom that looked like it had retired sometime in the 70s. We unpacked the few things we brought, made a simple dinner in this heavy cast iron skillet, and played cards on the kitchen table. It actually felt okay for a while except for one thing, the silence outside. It wasn't like a quiet neighborhood kind of silence where you still hear a dog bark 2 streets over or a car in the distance. This was complete. No crickets, no wind rustling the leaves, just nothing. Like the whole forest was holding its breath. I kept telling myself it was because of the cold, but something about it crawled under my skin. Around midnight, I crashed in the spare room. Caleb took the other. The mattress felt like a thick pad thrown over a board, and the blankets smelled faintly like cedar. Not great, not awful. I was out in minutes until something woke me up. I couldn't tell what time it was. There was no clock in the room, but the cabin was pitch black except for a faint glow leaking through the window. I didn't hear anything, nothing at all, but something felt off, like the way the air changes when someone steps into a room behind you. I turned my head toward the window. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare footprints right outside, pressed deep into the soft dirt, still damp from yesterday's rain. Dozens of them clustered near the porch, then trailing off toward the trees. They weren't there when we arrived. I shook Caleb awake, dragged him to the window. He stared out for a long time before finally saying, "They're probably old. My cousins. Come out here sometimes, but the rain was yesterday. Those prints were sharp, crisp, fresh. We locked the doors after that, pretending it was fine. Both of us laughing way too hard, because that's what you do when you're lying to yourself. Morning didn't make me feel any better. The prints were still there, clearer in daylight. And then I noticed something else. There were no small prints, no variation in size. Every single one was identical. Same length, same width. Like one person had walked in circles over and over, leaving the exact same impression each time. I told Caleb. He just shook his head and changed the subject. Neither of us mentioned the hike we'd planned. We stayed inside, made lunch, and played cards again. By late afternoon, the prints were gone, not washed away. The ground looked too smooth, like someone dragged something flat over it, erasing everything. Caleb swore he hadn't touched them. I believed him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints multiplying in the mud. Around 1 a.m., I heard at the front door creaking, slow, heavy, like weight pressing, and down on the wood. I told myself it was wind, except we hadn't heard a single gust since we got there. The trees outside didn't even move. I sat up, held my breath. The sound stopped. After what felt like forever, I slipped out of bed and woke Caleb. We armed ourselves with a fire poker and a wrench from the tool bag. Both doors were locked. Nothing looked touched. We ended up sitting in the main room with every light on, just waiting. Then sometime after 3, it started again. Footsteps on the porch, slow, dragging. The boards groaned under the weight. Caleb whispered my name, and I saw it in his face. He heard it too. We didn't move, didn't even breathe. The steps circled the cabin once, twice, then stopped right in front of the door. We waited. One knock, heavy, then another, harder. Then the sound that still burned into my brain. The scrape of fingernails or something sharper dragging down the wood. Long uneven lines, slow and deliberate, like it wanted us to hear every second. Caleb grabbed his keys and whispered, "We're leaving." No argument. We bolted through the back door, straight into the trees. No flashlight, no plan, just run. The dark felt solid, like it was swallowing us whole, but we didn't stop. Roots caught our feet. Branches tore at our arms, but we just kept going. I didn't look back, but I heard it. The door opening. Not breaking, opening. We didn't stop until we hit gravel. Eventually, the faint shape of a road appeared, and then headlights. A truck slowed, saw us, and took us into town. Later, Caleb said his family went back. He never told me what they found, just that they boarded the place up and never invited anyone there again. I was 29 when I booked a lake cabin in a remote stretch of the Appalachians. It was kind of a last-minute decision. I'd been behind on freelance work for weeks, barely keeping up with deadlines. My apartment had started to feel like a pressure cooker, emails, unread messages, half-eaten takeout containers, and the same 4 walls closing in on me. I needed out. The listing called the place Wren Hollow. It sounded quiet, simple, just a little wood cabin with a view of the lake, and minimal amenities, which in the language of vacation rentals meant no Wi-Fi. That was the main appeal. Honestly, I figured the isolation would force me to focus. No scrolling, no doom-refreshing news, no distractions, just trees, water, and time. The drive out there took most of the afternoon. My GPS died somewhere between the 3rd and 4th ridge, so I had to rely on memory and a series of vague text instructions from the owner. Turn left at the rusted mailbox. Go past the stone bridge. Ignore the private property sign. Very Appalachian Blair Witch energy. By the time I finally rolled up the gravel drive, my shoulders were tight. My head was pounding. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow lane, just sort of plopped at the edge of the lake, like it had been forgotten. It wasn't much to look at. Low roof, weathered siding, a porch that leaned slightly to the left. The whole thing looked like it would sigh if it could. I sat in the car for a minute before getting out, just listening. No traffic, no voices, no planes overhead. Just quiet. Thick. Complete quiet. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Inside, the place smelled faintly of cedar, like someone had tried to air it out before I arrived. The furniture was a random assortment of old stuff, scratched wooden chairs, a sagging couch with a knitted throw, and a table that looked like it had been salvaged from a church basement. There was a fireplace with a meat pile of logs stacked beside it, and a kitchen that was clean enough. Not fancy, but livable. The best part was the view. The back of the cabin opened up to the lake with a wide kitchen window and a small porch that overlooked the water. When I stepped out to grab my last bag, I noticed the dock stretching out from the shore. It was old, bored, soft from too much rain and sun, but it held together, and tied up neatly at the end of it was a canoe. The kind of canoe you'd expect to see in a summer camp movie. Wooden, faded with scrapes and scars along the sides. The hull clearly seen better days, but the rope holding it in place was brand new. The knots were crisp, the line was bright white. No fraying, no dirt. It looked like someone had tied it up that morning. I didn't know how I'd missed it when I first pulled in. I figured it came with the cabin, maybe a bonus feature the owner forgot to mention. That first evening passed in a blur. I was tired from the drive, so I kept it simple. Threw together a pasta dinner, cracked open a book, and passed out before 10 wow. I remember waking up once in the night, not from a sound exactly, more like a strange awareness, but it passed, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, I sat up at the kitchen table. It felt good to work. No distractions, no notifications buzzing. For the first time in a while, I got into a rhythm. Sent off a few drafts, made edits, even outlined something new. By noon, my back was sore, so I stood up, stretched, and stepped onto the porch. That's when I noticed it. The canoe was gone. The dock was bare. The rope was still tied, but dangling loose into the water like someone had just untied it and let the canoe drift. I stood there blinking, trying to make sense of it. But no, the image of that canoe was etched in my brain. I'd seen it. I remembered the new rope, the old wood, the whole thing. I scanned the lake, but the surface was flat, smooth as glass, nothing moving, no ripples, no sounds of paddling. I tried to logic it out. Maybe the owner had stopped by and taken it. Maybe a neighbor had access to the dock. There wasn't a fence. There could have been a shared easement along the water. I told myself not to overthink it. Still, it sat heavy in my chest. Later that afternoon, I laced up my boots and took a trail. I'd passed on the drive-in, just needed to move to clear my head. The trail was narrow and overgrown, but it looped through a quiet stretch of woods and back around the lake. I didn't see a single person, not even a deer. By the time I returned, the light was low and gold. I came up the drive, turned the corner toward the cabin, and stopped. The canoe was back, tied in exactly the same spot. Same clean knots, same rope. Like it had never left, like it had been waiting. I walked halfway toward the dock, then froze. The air felt heavier than before. Not dangerous, but off. I turned back, went inside, and locked the door without even meaning to. That night, I double-checked the porch light and left the curtains cracked. Sleep was restless. I kept waking at odd hours, heart racing like my body knew something I didn't. Just before dawn, I gave up and started coffee. The sky was still that strange pre-morning blue. I pulled the curtain aside without thinking. The canoe wasn't in the water. It had been flipped upside down on the dock. Water dripped off it in little streams, pooling on the wood. The rope was wet too, like it had just been pulled in. It looked freshly used, recent, alive almost. I stood there, mug in both hands, stomach hollow. I didn't go outside, didn't touch my laptop. I sat at the table for hours, straining for any sound, but the air stayed still. That night, I left every light on, sat in bed, fully dressed, shoes nearby. The feeling of being watched had moved inside, curling in the corners, waiting. Around midnight, it hit me again. That jolt like I needed to look. I crossed to the window, pulled the curtain back an inch. The canoe was gone, and the rope was moving, trailing into the water, making lazy circles like someone had let go seconds earlier. The lake beyond was pure black, bottomless. I stared into it, squinting for something, but nothing came. Eventually, I shut the curtain and sat down on the edge of the bed, hands clenched in my lap until sunrise. By the fourth morning, I was unraveling, couldn't eat, couldn't focus. My hands shook as I tried to zip my suitcase. I packed like I was fleeing a fire, stuffed shirts in corners, left socks behind, didn't check the fridge. I just wanted out. I had one bag on my shoulder and the other dragging behind me when I stepped onto the porch and froze. The canoe wasn't at the dock. It had been pulled onto the shore, half submerged in mud. It sat at an odd angle, like it had been dragged there in a hurry, and neatly on top of it was a flannel shirt. Not mine. It was soaked, sleeves arranged, across the chest like someone had placed it there for me. Heavy with water, sagging, but still red and navy classic. Almost familiar, but not quite. I didn't touch it. I didn't go near it. I made 2 trips to the car, eyes fixed on the gravel. Both times, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. I didn't look up, not even when I shut the trunk. When the car finally started, the crunch of gravel under the tires sounded like bones snapping. I didn't let myself breathe until the trees swallowed. The road behind me and the lake was gone. And I never looked back. The lake house had been in my family forever, or at least it felt like forever. My grandfather built it sometime back in the 50s, carving it out of cedar with his own hands. 2 full stories. Rough wood siding gone soft and grey over the decades. A porch that leaned a little more each year, and a narrow dock that pointed straight out into the lake like it was trying to escape everything behind it. It sat way out in the hills near a place called Dovemont. Not much of a town, honestly. Just a diner, a gas station with a single pump and a few scattered houses that never looked occupied. You wouldn't even know the lake was there unless you were looking for it. No signs, no maps. You had to follow this winding gravel road, climbing through thickets of pine and oak, barely wide enough for one car. Cell service gave out before the last turn. After that, it was just you and the trees. I went up alone late October, told myself it was to take a break, decompress a little, maybe finish a couple of short essays I've been putting off. But really, I just needed to be somewhere, quiet for a while. No news, no texts, no polite small talk, just stillness. And I got it at first. That first morning, I woke up to the sound of nothing. No cars, no voices, just the kind of silence that makes your ears ring a little. I made coffee the old way, boiled the water, poured it through the filter. No machine. To press. I took my mug out to the porch and sat in the old rocker, creaking with every breath of movement. The lake was like glass, not a ripple. It didn't even look like water, more like a dark pane of mirror that swallowed the sky. I set the mug down on the railing just for a second, ran inside to grab my sweater. The air had a bite to it that hadn't been there when I first stepped out. I was gone 10 seconds max. When I came back, the mug was gone. I blinked, checked the porch floor, checked the steps. Nothing. The railing wasn't wet, no coffee stains. It was like it had never been there. For a second, I thought maybe I'd already carried it back in me somehow, like my brain had just skipped. But there was nothing on the counter. I even looked in the sink. Empty. I figured I must have knocked it off somehow and not noticed. Maybe it bounced into the grass or rolled under the porch. I searched for a while, didn't find anything. Eventually, I gave up and made another cup. It bugged me a little, but not enough to ruin the day. Later that afternoon, I headed down to the dock. It had been a few years since I'd been up there. I wanted to see if the rowboat was still seaworthy. There was this old wooden bench built into it. I figured I'd just sit there a bit and let the quiet soak in. That's when I saw it. My mug sitting on the bench inside the rowboat, not knocked over, not stained, sitting perfectly upright like someone had just set it there. I stood on the dock, not moving, just staring at it. My first thought wasn't even fear. It was confusion, mixed with a little irritation. I knew I hadn't brought it down there. I didn't even have shoes on that morning. There's no way I carried a full mug of coffee barefoot down a hill without noticing. Still, I told myself, maybe I did. Maybe I spaced out more than I thought. A little memory glitch. Everyone gets them. I picked it up and brought it back to the house. Didn't even rinse it out. Just left it on the kitchen table and went to bed early. The second day I went fishing. Same routine, cup of coffee, book under my arm, tackle box. I went down to the dock around mid-morning, ready to let the day drift by. Except something felt weird. It was subtle at first, just a feeling. The dock looked longer. The house seemed farther behind me than I remembered. But when I turned around and counted the boards beneath my feet, it was the same. Old boards, weathered, nailed down in the same crooked line they'd always been. I shrugged it off. Maybe the lake level dropped. Maybe perspective was playing tricks. I cast my line and tried to settle in, but the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. The space around me felt stretched, like there was more distance than there should have been. I stood up, walked back to the shore, counted again. 12 boards. No way. I did it again. Slower this time, trying to stay calm. 16. And the water, it didn't reflect anything anymore. Not the trees, not the sky, not even me. Just this thick black surface that swallowed light. I leaned out a bit just to get a better look and felt this tight, irrational panic grip the base of my spine, like I'd almost stepped off a cliff. I went back inside. Didn't go near the dock again that day. On the third morning, I tried something different. Pulled out the old family map, the one that marked the shoreline trails and springs. There was supposed to be a natural spring about a 4 mile around the bend. I figured it'd be a good way to reorient myself, get moving, fresh air, reset the weirdness. I followed the path along the edge of the lake. The ground was soft, muddy in places. I noticed my own footprints behind me, pressed deep in the wet soil. I kept walking and walking. The same dead birch tree showed up 3 times. Same exact tree. Same cluster of fungi near its roots. Then I saw the dock ahead of me again. Not another dock. The dock. I stopped cold. My footprints had looped back. Perfect little U-turn in the mud. I'd been walking in circles without realizing it. I didn't even think. Just turned around and went straight back to the house, heart hammering the whole way. I didn't try to explain it. Didn't tell myself it was nothing. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. That night, I stayed on the porch too long. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe it was just a weird coincidence. I watched the sun dip behind the trees. The lake darkened until it looked like it wasn't there at all, just a hole in the earth. That's when I saw the light, faint across the water, yellowish, flickering. At first, it looked like a lantern, like someone walking with it through the woods on the far bank. I leaned forward in my chair, tried to see if it was a hiker, maybe a lake camper. But the longer I watched, the more wrong it felt. It didn't sway, didn't bounce. It just stayed there perfectly still, suspended between 2 trees like it was hovering. It wasn't a light, not really. It was just watching. I stared at it for what must have been an hour. Couldn't make myself go inside, couldn't look away. I sat there until the cold finally got to me. My hands started to go numb. Only then did I stand up and back away from the porch. By morning, I was exhausted, barely slept. My thoughts were too loud, too sharp. But it was quiet outside, too quiet. And then I heard it. A sound I can still hear if I think about it hard enough. Creek splash, rhythmic measured oars in water. I ran outside and looked at the lake. The rowboat was moving out near the center, gliding smoothly, the oars dipping in and out in perfect sync. But no one was in it. It moved like someone was rowing, but there was no one there. Not a shadow, not a shape, just the boat, the sound and the black mirror flat water beneath it. Then the oars stopped mid-stroke, hung in the air for a second, then slowly folded in. Against the sides like someone had just finished up and was ready to dock, except it just floated there empty. I went inside, grabbed my bag, threw everything into it, didn't fold a single thing, didn't care if I had my toothbrush. My only goal was getting out before the sun dropped again. I got in the car, turned the key, click, nothing. Tried again, click again. Harder, click. My hands were shaking, eyes stinging. I looked up at the house, and there it was, the mug. The same one from that first morning, sitting on the hood of the car, centered, upright, clean. I didn't try again. I grabbed my bag, slammed the door shut, and walked 2 miles of rough gravel road through hills and pine. No flashlight, just adrenaline and stubborn fear. Eventually, I found a bar of signal near an overlook called the tow service. Guy came up from Winton. Friendly. Asked if I wanted to ride back with him. I said yes. He tried the ignition. Before he hauled the car, it started on the first try. He asked if I still wanted it to. I said no. He offered to wait while I grabbed anything from the house. I told him I was good.